The Entei event information is here, and there's a reason why I might have to start hunting for a Growlithe. And we'll circle back to this towards the end of the video, but it is more to do with this event's bonuses than it is to do with Entei's skill. Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video, it's Bro Vinny here. Now brace yourselves, this is gonna be a long video. I do apologize, but it's not my fault. Even just reading through this event information took me like half an hour to try and understand everything. In fact, it's so long the event information can be collapsed, and this is the first time they've done something like this. I will try and keep it concise. I will try to give you guys the most important bits of information, but if it does become too long, pause, just remember where you left off and come back and keep watching, because you might need to take a break halfway through. Heck, I might need to take a break halfway through this. Today, we're covering the event information, we're covering Entei's skill, and we're going to cover some preparation tips, and then we'll cover some tips on how to cook during this event, and my main tip is try and get curry for this event. We will cover the main exchange shop, so the event exchange shop, in a separate video when we actually get the data mine on that, so don't worry about that. I will just briefly mention it in this video though. Now, if you just want to know the event bonuses, this infographic is great. Thank you to Rosalie for making this one. Basically, everything you need to know about the Entei event, which is not the fire event, which is at the top there, all the main bonuses are already written here in a very concise manner. You can find this calendar on my Discord, and Rosalie has very clearly stated here for people who are just starting the game, there's two things you very crucially must know is that for this event, one, you must go to Greengrass Isle. Entei is not available anywhere else during this event. After the event, Entei is available at Taupe Hollow, but for this event, you must go to Greengrass Isle. And you should only do one session a day for the Entei event. That's because in the second session, you can't get any of the event exchange items. We'll come back to this in a moment, but you should only do one session a day to maximize your drowsy power. For the really advanced players, you can do 2 sessions a day. In fact, we found that it didn't make a huge difference from the Raikou event when your drowsy power hit extremely high levels, like beyond whale levels. But for the average player, just do 1 session a day, otherwise you might lose out on some event items. And this calendar is a beautiful illustration of what actually happens in the next few weeks. We've got on the 6th, which is the Vulpix and Fire event, and then on the 20th of May, the Entei event. And it will be running for 2 weeks. You can also see the overlap of the Good Sleep Day event where your drowsy power goes up even more, which is great. We want high drowsy power for more Entei mains, and we also want high drowsy power for a better chance at encountering Entei. And then there's a special, like a mini Good Sleep Day type of thing going on the last day of the 2-week event. Not really sure why that is. We'll talk about that in a moment. But on that day, you'll also get 1.5 times the drowsy power. All right, let's get started. Number 1. What is Entei's main skill? So Entei will come with Helper Boost Fire, which a lot of people predicted because it's the equivalent of Raikou's main skill just for fire types, which means that if you have lots of different fire species on your team, let's say you've got a Ninetales, you've got a Typhlosion, you've got a Charizard, you've got Entei himself, and then you've got an Arcanine, or maybe a Flareon. So there's 6 fire types. By the time this event starts, there's going to be 6 fire type Pokemon that you could have on a team. But of course, maximum number for a team is 5. If you have 5 fire Pokemon on the team, Entei's main skill will be the most powerful. But hang on a second. Nowhere in here does it say that Entei is a skill specialist. How important this is depends on whether Entei's actually a skill specialist. If it happens that Entei's a berry or an ingredient specialist, everything I talk about in terms of how good this skill is almost irrelevant. I do think there's a very high chance that it will be a skill specialist. I just can't assume that just yet. Having said that, one thing to note is that if Entei ends up being a skill specialist of Helper Boost Fire, it completely power creeps Arcanine out of the picture. You could argue that Arcanine can be used as one of the team members for a fire boost, but in actual fact, that's not really necessary because we already have 5 Fire-type Pokemon. We got Ninetales, Entei, Charizard, Typhlosion, and Flareon, all of which are generally more desirable, more useful than Arcanine. So even that argument itself doesn't work. Now that we actually know Entei's skill, it does make Ninetales better. So in another video, we talked about Ninetales being the poor man's Typhlosion, or the beginner's Typhlosion. And that still remains to be true if you're not using Entei. If you're just using a regular fire team without Entei, Typhlosion is just generally better. But if you have Entei on the team, then you can power up Entei's main skill by having a Ninetales as well. In fact, because of all the event bonuses, which we'll cover in a moment, Entei itself is super powerful for its own event, which kind of makes sense. This was not something we experienced with the Raikou event because the bonuses, the buffs during the event weren't as good. So since Entei is usable for this event, Ninetales is also usable for this event, as is any other good Fire-type Pokemon that you've caught in the past. Now, besides using it for the event itself, Entei can also be useful at Taupe Hollow, which it's favorite berry for. And for most people, Taupe Hollow is one of the areas which is the hardest to build a good team for, so Entei helps in that regards. But between Entei and Raikou might actually see more the long-term use because we haven't got an electric island yet, and that's bound to come at some point. So if you're thinking about investing main skill seeds, given that they're both the same main skill, assuming they're both skill specialists, Raikou still should be considered, but maybe not until the Electric Berry Island is released. Another thing to note is that Entei, just like Raikou and probably in the future any special Pokemon that gets released, the legendaries, is that the first Entei you catch will have the exact same stats for everyone. We call those the Universal Raikou or the Universal Entei. That's just what we call it, it's not an official term. But just for your reference, these are the stats of the Universal Raikou. Could it be the same for Universal Entei? That's only up to speculation at this stage. We'll find out when Entei actually gets released. The only thing that tends to be different between different individuals is the ingredient list. So even for Universal Raikou, people could have different ingredient lists. We don't yet know the stats for Universal Entei, so we won't talk about it in this video. For part 2 of the video, we're going to talk about the actual Entei event itself. Let's cover the information about the Entei event first. It will be a 2-week event just like the Raikou event, starting from the 20th of May, ending on the 2nd of June being the last day. And just like the Raikou event, the event exchange shop will be extended a little further, a little longer than the event itself, so that you can utilize any final Raikou mains that you haven't spent up to the Thursday of the week after the event finishes. And now, probably the most important part of this video, the event bonuses, and being aware of how powerful these can be, especially so for beginners. And equally important for anybody who's trying to min-max the game and maximize their drowsy power in order to get more Entei mains, get more exchange shop items, maybe catch a few extra Enteis. Now, every fire Pokemon will be buffed, just in different ways. Number 1, because it's going to be Leopard Berry guaranteed at Greengrass Isle, your fire type berry specialists are going to be absolutely essential. Just like every other week, where we try to get a berry finding S berry specialist that is also favorite for the typing of that area on the team. But besides that, ingredient Pokemon are getting a relative bigger buff because every time you do drop an ingredient, you're gonna get 1 extra. Now that applies to berry Pokemon as well, and it applies to skill specialists as well, but usually you would invest in ingredient specialists when they've got ingredient finder up. So you're gonna get more of these extra ingredients if you're bringing an ingredient finder up Pokemon. Fire type Pokemon will also have a 50% boost to their skill trigger rate. But combine this with the next 2 points. In week 1 of the event, and this didn't happen with the Raikou event. In week 1 of the event, main skill level of all fire Pokemon will be boosted by 1. So unless you've invested your fire type Pokemon to max level main skill already, this will benefit everybody. If you already have made it to the max level, the game says that you cannot go any further than that. Which is fair, that's what we would have expected anyway. It's just that you're not going to see as much of that extra skill bonus for this event if you already have max skill level. As for week 2 of the event, high type helper Pokemon gets 3 extra main skill levels, and this is crazy. This part is crazy. That means if you just found an average Entei that's at level 1 main skill, you put it on a team and it's already level 4 main skill. And we know that the level of the main skill, generally speaking, is more important than the skill trigger rate. Once you reach max level, then skill trigger rate is more important. Let's take one example. Typhlosion's main skill will be level 3 if you evolved it from Cyndaquil, which means at minimum you get 393 strength. But for those 3 extra main skill levels, you can get 1033 main skill strength, which is more than double what you would normally get. And the skill trigger rate is 1.5 times more than usual. If you're running a full team of fire type Pokemon, you're essentially getting 15 free main skill seeds for a limited time. So even if you don't feel like the main skill is that powerful, if you've never experienced that much main skill in your life, you should run a full team of fire Pokemon anyway, just to get a feeling of how it's like to be an absolute whale at this game. Like if you've got a Charizard that you evolved from Charmander and you've only been getting 11 ingredients from your ingredient magnet for the last 6 months, well, you get to experience it at level 6, which is 21 ingredients. In this case, it's not more than double, but it's still a huge jump for that limited time. In comparison, Skill Trigger M only gives you about a 36% increase in skill trigger rate, which is nowhere near double. Of course, it's still nice to have, but pure strength-wise, the skill level itself is more important than the skill trigger. For newer players who are just joining the game and maybe just found a relatively okay Typhlosion, just as a reference, this buff is relatively more important to you than everyone else. And that's because you don't need to invest any candies or any dream shards in your Typhlosion beyond just getting it to a Typhlosion. And it can produce charge strength amounts that long-term players are getting. And you didn't even have to spend a main skill seed at all, which you might not have many anyway because you're just starting the game. The analogy I like to make is that it's like getting 5 extra main skill seeds for free for week 1 of the event and 15 extra main skill seeds for week 2 of the event if you're running a full team of fire Pokemon. So the catch is that for week 2 of the event, you should try to have almost an entire team of fire Pokemon only. For week 1, because the buff is not as crazy, you could run other Pokemon besides fire type Pokemon to try and match the berry or to try and match the ingredients that you need. But if you've managed to save a certain amount of ingredients before the event started, knowing what dish type you're going to get by, for example, forcing the dish type using Easy Travel Ticket, then you could just run a lot of fire Pokemon. And we'll come back to this right at the end of the video when we talk about dishes for this event. But is it actually plausible to run a full fire team? And I have to thank the Revival from my Discord for pointing this out. Unlike Raikou event, the main skills of electric Pokemon don't have as much coverage as the main skills in the fire type Pokemon. So let's say you do run an Entei on the team, and then you've got 4 other fire type Pokemon. You've got Charizard who can drop Ingredient Magnet, which is great for filling the pot. Even if you don't get the right ingredients, you can use them as extra ingredients. Because if you're also running Flareon at the same time, you're going to need those extra ingredients. So that's already 2 synergistic main skills. Typhlosion's main skill, very self-explanatory. No matter the situation, it just powers up Snorlax. And Ninetales somewhat removes your need for a healer on the team because our main healers right now are Gardevoir, Wiggly, or Sylveon. And I understand that we still want to use them where possible because it buffs the entire team. But if Ninetales could cover some of the healing, and hopefully it does, we don't have the full stats on Ninetales yet, but let's say it covers some of the healing, and maybe you've saved about 10 to 20 energy pillows from your previous weeks, which I've told you guys to do. Now you don't have a healing problem. Between pillows and Ninetales, you should be able to keep your team relatively healthy. I don't expect the energy levels to be as good as usual by running this kind of team with Entei, but I think it will still be relatively okay, especially with those extra main skill levels for Ninetales. So if I assume that you evolved your Ninetales from Vulpix, you're already starting at level 2 main skill, on the first week, your Ninetales will heal 22-23 per trigger, and in the second week, it will heal 38 per trigger. And there's about 50% chance that this healing will happen on the lowest energy Pokemon. So you can see that even without investing much main skill seeds into these Pokemon, you're still relatively going to want to run these Fire-type Pokemon. And that's purely because of the event bonuses. Now, it's actually very difficult to make comparisons between running different teams with Fire types, without Fire types. And just for reference, for the Raikou event, the recommendation was to use your easy travel ticket to re-roll your berry types to try and at least match several of the berry types, not just the electric berries. And that's because the electric type coverage wasn't great. Besides Raichu, there were a lot of limitations of running an electric team. Like, you could run an Ampharos, but that means you have to log in the game a lot in order to get all those skill triggers. You could run a Jolteon, but we know that extra helpful S is just not a powerful skill, except when you use it to overstack. You could run a Dedenne, but Dedenne was so costly to invest, being a single stage Pokemon with no evolutions. And then the only real alternative to Raichu was to run a Halloween hat Pikachu if you got a good one. And then all those skills don't work in synergy, unlike the fire Pokemon. So it made a lot of sense for the Raikou event to re-roll the berries. But for the Entei event, if you look at Ingredient Magnet and Expand Pot working in synergy, you should immediately think, I need to get a good dish type. So whether it be curry, desserts, or salads. Now, Arcanine wasn't included in this list. And I think it makes a lot of sense that you don't run an Arcanine when you already have an Entei that does the same thing but better. But we can't completely ignore Arcanine just yet, and that's because amongst all the known Fire-type Pokemon, so we don't know about Ninetales or Entei's ingredient lists yet, but amongst all the known ones, only one of them can do triple fiery herbs. And we will talk about cooking in a moment. The last event bonus that we're getting is just for that one final day on the Sunday of the second week of the event. Our drowsy power will be multiplied by 1.5 times, kind of like a good sleep day event, but only for one day and on the strongest day of the week. I'm not 100% sure what the intention of this is. Maybe it's to give everyone an awesome finish to the event, maybe a chance to encounter Entei, maybe even Raikou. So here's a little fun idea for you guys, if you want to do something crazy, is to try and get Raikou and Entei to spawn in the same sleep session. Because that would be a really awesome screenshot to flex. Now, unfortunately, even if you did keep your Raikou incense from the last event, you won't be able to run two Pokemon incenses in the same session. The way to try and get both Entei and Raikou to spawn in the same session would be to utilize that extra boost in the drowsy power on your strongest day, Sunday, and then running a Raikou incense. Since Entei already has a boosted spawn rate, you'd hope that naturally Entei will spawn. Now, unless the game has some sort of special restriction that says only one special Pokemon can spawn at a time, you may be able to see both Entei and Raikou together. Part 3 of this video, we're going to talk about Entei mains. We're not going to talk about the cost and the value of using Entei mains in this video. That's a separate video when we get the data mine on that. But in terms of collecting Entei mains, there are 4 main ways, and you will be using these Entei mains to get event exchange shop items. And you want to maximize how many mains you get in order to exchange as many items from the shop as possible, because you can get great things like main skill seed, firestone, and we know we need at least 3 firestones if you want every species in the game right now, and Entei incense and Entei biscuits. And I'm very happy to let you guys know that the developers are going to give us more mains than the last event. And hopefully that means that we're gonna get more of the event exchange items. So they said here that they plan to increase the number of mains that we can obtain compared to Raikou event. But they will also adjust the event exchange shop. So what I think that means is they're gonna make things a little cheaper than the Raikou event. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense. They wouldn't make it easier to get Entei mains, but then make items more expensive, which then works out to be the same. Like, what was the whole point of doing that? Now, for the people who didn't do the Raikou event, or if you just forgot how it went, there are 4 main ways you can get Entei mains. Number 1, and it's the main way that you're gonna get Entei mains, is to do sleep research. That means go to sleep your 8.5 hours, or if you're a child, 11 hours, to get 100 sleep score, and try and have as high a drowsy power as early in the week as possible, but also throughout the whole week as well. And also try and get your Snorlax strength as high as possible so that it multiplies even better when you multiply by the 100 sleep score. But do not do 2 sleep sessions, because what happens is usually if you do a nap, that's usually for most people who are not night shifters, will be a short nap, which means maybe you're only getting about 20% of the event mains, and then you get nothing for your long session. But the main tip here is, if you can, run a good camp ticket. You should be running a good camp ticket for dishes anyway. We'll come back to this in a moment once again, but run a good camp ticket so you get 1 extra spawn a day for more Entei mains. Even better if they're fire spawns. Of course, you can't control what spawn you get with the good camp ticket, but you can control what spawn you get with Pokemon incense. Charmander incense, Cyndaquil incense, let's say you got Vulpix incense, or any other fire type incense that you've kept over the last few weeks or months. Use them for this event to get extra Entei mains. You can get them from limited time missions. We'll come back to this once that gets data mined. You can buy the Entei mains with bundles, and we did extensive research on this, is through research community. So that's your friends, your 50 friends. Now the developers mentioned that the rate of mains given out from your community research will increase with the Entei event compared to the Raikou event. The data here is not accurate for the Entei event, but it still gives us a good reference to what we expect. Now, based on our data collection from the last event, on average, if you have a full list of closeness 5 friends, you expect about 32 mains a day, but it drops significantly down to 10-11 mains a day if your entire list were just closeness 4 friends. If you have closeness 2 or lower, it's very rare to actually get Raikou mains back in the Raikou event. We might expect the ratio to be something similar, but we don't know how much exactly they're going to increase that by in total. So you can see that they say the higher you're closest with a researcher, the more likely you get Entei mains from the research community. But what we can use to estimate how much mains we're going to get relative to Raikou is this statement here. The developers have said that basically for children account who don't have community research activated, they don't have friends. In the last event, in the Raikou event, they got a free 50 mains just for logging in per week. So they got 100 mains for the event as a community research limited time special gift. In contrast, for the Entei event, they're getting a 40% increase in mains because it's 70 per week, so it's 140, so it's a 40% increase compared to the Raikou event. So if it's analogous to that, we expect about 40% increase on the numbers down here. And 32 Raikou mains times 1.4 is about 45 mains a day. So if you've got a full list of closeness 5 friends, this is how I would estimate how much mains you're going to get per day. This is just speculation, but that's as close as we're going to get to the truth for now. And one more thing to note is that something I've learned from the Raikou event, and I kept forgetting throughout the week, I got too excited trying to catch Raikou, that items were cheaper in the second week than they were the first week. So for the same limited amount of mains, you should plan ahead and make sure you can cover the items in the second week of the event, which gets added to the pool of items you can exchange, but it's just cheaper to wait for week 2 to come along for the same items. Of course, you don't want to wait too long because you want to start catching Entei so that you can actually use Entei, if you want, for the second week. And a few extra bits of information, and you should already know this if you did the Raikou event, is that for the Entei incense, you can only hold 1 at a time. So you cannot exchange for another one until you've used up that one that you're holding on to, even if you put it on the incense little stool next to the camp. You can hold on to 1 Entei incense if you want to take a good photo with Entei at Taupe Hollow instead. I don't know why else you want to hold on to the Entei incense, maybe to stack it with, or maybe to keep it for Suicune event to see if you can get both Suicune and Entei spawn at the same time. To me, I'd rather catch as many Enteis as possible to get a better chance at a good one. Some people would consider keeping 1 Entei incense because they haven't been able to save enough points for a master biscuit, so then you can use the master biscuit with your last Entei incense together. So you just have to math out how many Entei incense and biscuits, Entei biscuits that you can buy during the event and use together, and maybe you'll still have one leftover incense that you'll use with the master biscuit at a later point when you save enough sleep points. And speaking of Entei biscuits are worth 6 friendship points. I assume that Entei is gonna have 30 friendship points just like Raikor in order to catch. If you happen to hold on to any Entei biscuits, they will become converted to great biscuits after the event end, just like the Raikor event. It is not my recommendation to do that. Some free-to-play players like the great biscuits, so they think that might be a useful strategy. To me, it's still better for it to be worth more than it is worth less after the event. And as promised, for part 4 of this video, we are going to talk about dishes. We're going to talk about ingredients and team building, all of that together. As I already mentioned, we should focus on trying to run a full fire team, if possible, if not at least mostly a fire team, maybe with a healer or maybe with a mono ingredient specialist that you need the specific ingredients for. But let's say we do run a full fire team. What ingredient are we missing? Which dish type should we go for? When I say dish type, I mean, is it going to be curries, salads, or desserts that we're going to prefer for this event? And I'm going to tell you now, especially if you have a good corn farmer already, let's say a good beware, or maybe you've saved up enough corn from the last few weeks before the event, via ingredient magnet or other means, curry is the way to go. So let's start with what ingredients we currently can cover for with our fire type Pokemon. Don't forget that you're going to get an extra ingredient drop every time an ingredient is triggered. So let's say you got a Flareon with milk and milk. If it drops a milk, it gets an extra milk every time. So even skill specialists are kind of like ingredient specialists for this event. The ingredients we could potentially cover for, now it depends on what Pokemon you've invested in, whether you've got a mono sausage Charizard or whether you've got a sausage ginger Charizard. It depends on what you have. But I'm going to try and be general about this because I can't cover for every person's situation. Generally speaking, we can cover for sausages, gingers, herbs, a little bit of milk, and a little bit of cacao. Until Ninetales and Entei's ingredient lists are known, I can't say much about them. But let's work with what we already know. With those ingredients, we're gonna have trouble cooking anything good in salads. We need oil, we don't have oil, corn, tomato, potato, we have nothing for the green grass salad. So that's already out the window. Now I am considering some of the strongest dishes because I am gonna assume that you guys want to run your good camp ticket for this week. So you have expanded pot anyway, so you should be able to cook bigger dishes. We don't have leek, we don't have beans, we don't have mushrooms, we've got a bit of ginger. We got a bit of herbs, and hopefully you save some slowpoke tails that might help, but we don't have oil, we don't have apple, we don't have honey, we don't have corn. We don't have any of the strongest dishes. We've got a bit of sausage here, but we don't have most of the strong ingredients for salad. So if you roll a salad week, if you can, use your easy travel ticket. Now I know that's not feasible for free to play. You might only have one easy travel ticket from your monthly exchange shop, but you get the idea is that you're gonna have trouble cooking good dishes if you're in salad. Maybe you can cook a bit of contrary chocolate meat salad, but cacao is not farmed heavily and you will need a cacao Flareon. So you're gonna have to run an alternative ingredient farmer that isn't a fire type to complete any of these dishes. The dessert situation doesn't get any better. Again, cacao for flower gift macarons, that's a problem. You need 25 cacao. Even with the boost from the event, Flareon is just not going to cut it. Eggs, we don't have eggs, no honey. We've got some milk, we don't need to use too much milk. We can get it from Flareon. Apples, we've got a problem with apples. Ginger is fine, but then we're back to milk and corn. Milk will still be a bit in shortage unless your Flareon is milk at level 30 as well. And again, we're shortage on honey, we're shortage on egg, we've got a shortage on apples, corn, oil, mushroom, apple, honey again, apple again, honey again. We're in trouble if you've got desserts. If you get curry for this week, it's going to improve your game across the board because we can get herbs. You just have to check your Typhlosion, and your Arcanine, whether they will farm enough herbs. We can get sausages, Charizard, hopefully mono sausage. Corn we can't get, but we can get gingers. We can get gingers from maybe a mixed option Charizard, maybe from Typhlosion. We can't get potatoes, so if you're gonna cook Dream Eater butter curry, you better save up your potatoes and tomatoes from the week before. You could get some amount of milk and cacao if you have a Flareon that does both, but may not be enough. We can get herbs. In fact, we're gonna need a lot of herbs if you're thinking of cooking grilled tail curry or inferno corn keema curry. We don't have beans, we don't have leek, we don't have mushroom, we do have sausage, but ninja curry is probably not going to be cooked consistently because of how rare the other 3 ingredients are during this event. If you save up enough leeks in the weeks prior, you could do spicy leek curry because we can get ginger, we can get herbs. Missing potato, missing corn. We don't need to talk about egg bomb because we're missing honey, we're missing apple, egg, potato, we're missing all of it. We're also missing ingredients for mushroom curry. So basically, besides Inferno Corn Keema Curry, which you should try to cook every single meal, not only being a very powerful dish, but also matching at least 3 of the ingredients we could farm with our fire Pokemon, everything else is going to be subpar. So in conclusion, the tips here are 1, if you can, reroll for curry on both weeks, but it's more important that it's on the second week you get curry because you want more fire Pokemon for that second week because of the event bonus with the 3 extra main skill levels. The second tip is if you can't cover for a lot of these ingredients, farm them in the weeks before and then hold on to them so that you can at least cover the first 6 to 7 meals. And this is a strategy that some people have been employing already before we even talked about this event. And the third tip is, remember back when we talked about a full fire team having Flareon, Ninetales, Typhlosion, Charizard, and I said, well, actually we can't completely ignore Arcanine, not only because skill triggers are being boosted, the skill levels are being raised, but also Arcanine can do more herbs than other fire species. In fact, if you happen to roll level 30 herbs on Arcanine as opposed to sausage, hopefully your Charizard will do sausage and your Arcanine will do herbs. It will help you a long way in farming herbs, especially if you don't have herbs for Typhlosion for Inferno Corn Keema Curry. The amount of herbs needed, 27, is the highest amount of any ingredient in any dish so far in the game. No other dish in any of the categories requires 27 of one specific ingredient. So Arcanine will help you in that sense. So I am hoping that Ninetales and Entei, when they get released, they will cover some more of these ingredients. I'm fingers crossed that we get corn for Ninetales and maybe Entei as well, or perhaps even some tomatoes and potatoes to help cover for alternative curry dishes. The third tip is that if you're doing the keema curry, instead of farming every ingredient in the weeks before to prepare for the event, just farm corn. Have like 400 corn if you want, because during the event, you'll be running fire type Pokemon which are getting buffed. So you'll be able to get fiery herbs, you'll be able to get sausages and gingers with less trouble. You don't want to be running a Beware or even a Comfey during the event. So specifically for this event, Arcanine will be better if it has Berry Finding S and Ingredient Finding up because we want those herbs. Helping bonus will still be good too, but this is in contrast to normally you would want a skill specialist to have skill trigger up, which is like the opposite of what we're doing during this event. Thankfully, I don't expect anyone to need Arcanine outside of this event, so if you were to invest in one that doesn't have any skill trigger, it only has Berry Finding and it has Ingredient Finder up, that's gonna be just fine for this event, provided that you need the herbs. But if you decide that you can't cook that dish, or maybe you don't plan to run a good camp ticket, then you'll just have to do your own analysis. If you plan to make only Dream Eater butter curry, you're gonna have to run like a Flareon that has milk and cacao, and then you're gonna have to overfarm potatoes and tomatoes in the weeks before so that you can avoid having to farm them during the event. So you're gonna have to do your own analysis based on what you have. And the final tip that I have for you guys regarding how to optimize your dish is you can run a full fire team, but let's say you're missing corn now. Let's say you're halfway through the week, you've used up all your corn. Instead of running a beware by taking out a fire team member, what you can do is the trick where you can foresee whether Entei is actually going to trigger its skill. And that's by turning off your internet connection, your Wi-Fi, your 4G, 5G, turning it off, and then clicking on Entei to see if the skill has triggered. If it triggers, the game will automatically restart because the game won't register the trigger unless there's an internet connection. So you'll be able to foresee whether Entei has triggered. So you restart the game. Now, of course, you turn back on your internet, and the next time you click on Entei, you'll know that it will trigger. What's interesting is that Entei will bank its helper boost skill power based on having a full team of fire Pokemon first. If you then switch out your team, let's say you bring 4 Bewares in after you collected all the productions on every other Pokemon. Let's say you bring 4 Bewares in, then trigger Entei, it will help you produce a huge amount of corn because it will determine the actual helper boost effect based on the original team that the Entei was working with. So let's say your Entei was level 1, but because of the event boost is level 4 main skill, and you have 5 fire species on the Pokemon, you're gonna get 9 extra helps. So we got 9 extra helps, and a quarter of that will be corn. On average, we're gonna get 3.5 corn per trigger. So each Beware will produce let's say about 8 corn. And 4 of them means that you'll get 31 corn immediately if you know that Entei will trigger. And then you can swap back to your fire team. So in a way, you'll be able to farm corn very quickly in that way. Of course, I'm not saying everyone has 4 Bewares to just throw on a team like that, but the idea of the strategy is the same, no matter what you're going for. Even if you decide not to switch out the Pokemon, you'll still get a lot of good fire berries because of that skill. So Entei is no joke for this event, which again kind of makes sense because it's his own event, and I guess the developers had seen that people weren't using Raikou because of costly investments, so they gave us a limited time to check out how good Entei could actually be by giving us free skill level ups. If I missed any important information, and I might have because there's just so much going on, or if you have any crazy good tips, let me know in the comment section below. I'm going to end this video with this here. So I started a new topic under Sleep Topics in my Discord called Entei Event Quick Tips Compilation for you guys to add things as you think of them, add ideas and event tips as you think of them into this topic. To start us off, I've dragged over all the Raikou event tips we had for the Raikou event. Some of them aren't relevant anymore, but I have modified them now for the Entei event. So these are the first 13 tips I've got for you guys, so have a read of that. And if there's anything you don't understand from that, let me know in the comments section below, or just ask me on Discord. Thank you for watching, guys. I really appreciate you guys following this channel, liking and subscribing. For some reason, I really didn't expect this to be the case when I started. I became the biggest Pokemon Sleep English content creator, but I really couldn't have done it without you guys submitting your screenshots, your data, your bug reports, your ideas on team building, and definitely couldn't do it without your likes and subscribing. And special shout out for the members who have joined my channel over the last few months. Now, you guys know who you are, but I just want to shout out you guys anyway. So Caitlin Abrams, Guterade, Malok, John Hammock, Dave Plays Games, DY, JP, Keanu Kinda Nasty, and living in St. Louis. Special mention to Nerth, who is also a Pokemon Sleep content creator now. So thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.